in the depths of a maximum security facility, where every corner is watched and every movement recorded. Sometimes the most dangerous threats hide in plain sight. What happens when a single symbol, carved into concrete by desperate hands, becomes the key to uncovering a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power? This is the true story of how one guard's sharp eyes and military training saved countless lives, exposed a network of betrayal, and proved that sometimes the smallest details carry the biggest secrets. In a world where trust is currency and betrayal costs lives, Sergeant Marcus Chen was about to discover that his past training in military intelligence would become the most important skill he'd ever need. The symbol was barely visible, just 3 lines scratched into the wall of cell block D. Most people would have dismissed it as random scratches made by a bored prisoner. But Marcus wasn't most people. He recognized it immediately, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The morning shift at Riverside Federal Detention Center began like any other for Marcus Chen. The former Army intelligence sergeant had been working as a security guard for 8 months now, trying to build a quiet life after his military service ended. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady work, and Marcus appreciated the structured environment that reminded him of his time in the service. Marcus arrived at the facility at exactly 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his shift started. Old habits from the military died hard, and punctuality had been drilled into him during his 12 years of service. He badged in through the main entrance, nodded to the night shift supervisor, and made his way to the equipment room to collect his radio, keys, and daily assignment sheet. "Chen, you're on Block D today," called out Supervisor Williams, a heavy-set man in his 50s who had been running security at Riverside for over 2 decades. "We've got a new arrival coming in around noon, so keep an eye on things. The inmates have been restless lately." Marcus nodded and clipped his radio to his belt. Block D housed some of the facility's most challenging inmates, those awaiting trial for serious federal crimes. It required constant vigilance and a calm demeanor, skills Marcus had developed during his intelligence work in Afghanistan and Iraq. As he walked through the corridors toward his assigned block, Marcus noticed the familiar sounds of the facility coming to life. Breakfast trays clattering in the kitchen, the distant hum of fluorescent lights, and the occasional voice over the intercom system. It was a controlled environment, predictable and secure. Block D consisted of 40 cells arranged in 2 tiers, with a central common area where inmates could spend limited recreational time. Marcus began his morning routine conducting a visual inspection of each cell to ensure all inmates were accounted for, and there were no obvious security concerns. He moved methodically from cell to cell, making notes on his clipboard. Cell 12 to Rodriguez, Miguel, present and accounted for. Cell 13 to Thompson, James, sleeping. Cell 14 to Patterson, David, reading on his bunk. Everything appeared normal until Marcus reached cell 18. The cell's occupant, a man named Viktor Kozlov, was awake and sitting on the edge of his bunk. Kozlov had been arrested 3 weeks earlier on charges related to arms trafficking and conspiracy. He was a quiet inmate who kept to himself and rarely caused trouble. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't Kozlov himself, but something on the wall behind him. There, scratched into the concrete wall near the small window, were 3 thin lines arranged in a specific pattern. To most people, it would look like random scratches or perhaps graffiti, but Marcus's trained eye recognized it immediately. The symbol was a military field marking used by special operations units to indicate a dead drop location, a secret place where intelligence operatives could leave messages for each other. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but he maintained his composure, continuing his inspection as if nothing had caught his attention. His military training had taught him to never reveal what he knew until he was certain of the situation. He completed his rounds and returned to the security station, his mind racing with possibilities. The symbol bothered him throughout the morning. In his years of intelligence work, Marcus had learned that such markings were never accidental. They were precise, purposeful, and used only by people with specific training. The question was, who had made this marking, and why? During his lunch break, Marcus discreetly researched Viktor Kozlov's background using the facility's computer system. According to the files, Kozlov was a 42-year-old naturalized U.S. citizen originally from Eastern Europe. He had been arrested after a year-long federal investigation into illegal arms sales, but something about his profile didn't sit right with Marcus. The man's background seemed almost too clean, too carefully constructed. Marcus decided to take a different approach. He called his former unit commander, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, who now worked at the Pentagon. It had been 6 months since they'd spoken, but Marcus knew he could trust her judgment. "Marcus, good to hear from you." Colonel Mitchell's voice crackled through his cell phone during his break. "How's civilian life treating you?" "It's an adjustment, ma'am. Listen, I need to ask you about something, and it might sound unusual. Have you heard of any operations involving symbols or markings being used for communication in domestic situations?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's a very specific question, Marcus. Can you tell me why you're asking?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "I may have encountered something in my current work that reminds me of field markings we used overseas. I can't shake the feeling that it's significant." Colonel Mitchell's tone became more serious. "Marcus, if you're seeing operational symbols in a domestic setting, that could indicate something very serious. I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but I want you to be extremely careful. Document everything, but don't take any direct action until you understand what you're dealing with." The conversation left Marcus even more unsettled. He returned to his post with a heightened sense of awareness, knowing that what he had discovered might be more significant than a simple case of contraband or rule-breaking. That afternoon, the new inmate arrival that Supervisor Williams had mentioned was processed into the facility. The man's name was Alex Petrov, and according to his paperwork, he was being held on charges related to cybercrime and financial fraud. As Petrov was escorted to his cell in Block C, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Petrov made brief eye contact with Viktor Kozlov as they passed in the corridor. It lasted only a second, but Marcus saw Kozlov give an almost imperceptible nod. To an untrained observer, it would have appeared to be nothing more than one inmate acknowledging another. But Marcus recognized it as a form of nonverbal communication used by operatives to confirm recognition without arousing suspicion. As the day progressed, Marcus began to notice other subtle signs that troubled him. During recreational time, Kozlov positioned himself in the common area where he had a clear view of the corridor leading to Block C where Petrov was housed. Several times, Marcus observed Kozlov making small, seemingly casual gestures, adjusting his collar, scratching his ear, tapping his fingers on the table, that followed patterns Marcus remembered from his intelligence training. By the end of his shift, Marcus had filled 3 pages of notes documenting everything he had observed. The symbols, the eye contact, the positioning, and the subtle gestures all pointed to one disturbing conclusion. There were trained operatives communicating within the federal detention facility, and they were using methods that suggested this was not a coincidence. That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment, staring at his notes spread across the kitchen table. His military training told him he was looking at something significant, possibly dangerous, but he also knew that jumping to conclusions could be disastrous. He needed more information, and he needed to be absolutely certain before he took any action. He thought about his options. He could report his suspicions to Supervisor Williams, but without concrete evidence, it might sound like paranoid speculation. He could contact the FBI, but again, he needed more than observations and theories. His best option was to continue gathering intelligence while being extremely careful not to tip off the subjects of his surveillance. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would use his upcoming shifts to conduct a more thorough investigation, applying the same techniques he had used in military intelligence operations. He would document everything, identify patterns, and build a case based on evidence rather than suspicion. As he prepared for bed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at the edge of something much larger than a simple case of inmates breaking rules. The symbol on the wall had been a message, and someone had received it. The question now was, what was the message and what was being planned? His last thought before falling asleep was a reminder from his military training. In intelligence work, the smallest details often revealed the biggest secrets. Tomorrow, he would begin the most important investigation of his career, and the lives of everyone in the facility might depend on what he discovered. The symbol on the wall had been just the beginning. Marcus Chen was about to uncover a conspiracy that would test everything he had learned about loyalty, duty, and survival. Marcus arrived at work the next morning with a plan. He had spent most of the night thinking about how to approach his investigation without raising suspicions. His military intelligence training had taught him that successful surveillance required patience, attention to detail, and the ability to blend into the background. He began by studying the facility's layout more carefully than ever before. During his morning inspection, he noted the sight lines between different blocks, identified blind spots in the security camera coverage, and mapped out the routes that inmates took during their daily movements. Every detail could be significant. Viktor Kozlov appeared to be following his normal routine, but Marcus noticed subtle changes in his behavior. The man seemed more alert, more focused on his surroundings. During breakfast, Kozlov sat at a table that gave him a clear view of the entrance to the dining hall. When other inmates tried to join him, he politely discouraged them with small gestures and body language that suggested he preferred to eat alone. The breakthrough came during the afternoon recreational period. Marcus was monitoring the common area in Block D when he noticed Kozlov had positioned himself near the window that faced the outer exercise yard. At exactly 2:30 p.m., a maintenance worker appeared in the yard, ostensibly checking the fence line. The worker stopped directly in Kozlov's line of sight and began what appeared to be routine maintenance on a section of chain-link fencing. Marcus watched through binoculars from the security station as the maintenance worker made specific movements with his tools. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. It was Morse code, and Marcus recognized it immediately. The message was short but clear. Package ready. Kozlov's response was almost invisible. He placed his hand flat against the window glass for exactly 3 seconds, then removed it. In the intelligence world, this was a confirmation signal. The communication had been received and understood. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. But he forced himself to remain calm. He was witnessing a sophisticated communication system operating within the supposedly secure federal facility. The maintenance worker completed his repairs and moved on to other areas of the yard, but Marcus continued watching Kozlov, who returned to his normal activities as if nothing had happened. That evening, Marcus made a difficult decision. He needed help, but he couldn't risk alerting the wrong people. He decided to contact Agent Lisa Torres, an FBI investigator he had worked with during his final months in the military. Their joint operation had involved tracking weapons smugglers along the Mexican border, and Marcus had been impressed by her thoroughness and discretion. Agent Torres, this is Marcus Chen. We worked together on Operation Desert Shield 2 years ago. Marcus, I remember you well. You're the intelligence sergeant who helped us crack that smuggling ring in El Paso. How can I help you? Marcus explained his situation carefully, describing what he had observed without mentioning names or specific locations until he was certain of Torres's interest and availability to help. Marcus, what you're describing sounds like a coordinated intelligence operation. If foreign operatives are using a federal detention facility to communicate, this could be a matter of national security. I need you to continue documenting everything, but be extremely careful. Don't change your routine or do anything that might alert them to your surveillance. Torres agreed to meet with Marcus the following evening at a coffee shop 20 miles from the detention center. In the meantime, she would begin researching the backgrounds of the inmates Marcus had identified as potentially suspicious. The next day brought new developments that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. During his morning rounds, he discovered that the symbol on Kozlov's cell wall had changed. 2 additional lines had been added, creating a different pattern. Marcus recognized this as a field modification of the original symbol, indicating that the operational status had changed. More disturbing was what he observed during lunch period. Alex Petrov, the inmate from Block C, had been assigned to kitchen duty as part of the facility's work program. This gave him access to most areas of the prison and allowed him to observe daily routines, security procedures, and staff schedules. Marcus realized that this wasn't a coincidence. Petrov had specifically requested kitchen duty, and someone had approved the assignment. Marcus began paying closer attention to other inmates who might be part of the network. His surveillance revealed a third individual, Elena Vasquez, a woman housed in the facility's female wing who was awaiting trial on drug trafficking charges. During her brief appearance in the medical unit for a routine checkup, Marcus observed her making the same subtle hand gestures he had seen from Kozlov. The pattern was becoming clear. There were at least 3 trained operatives within the facility, all capable of sophisticated communication and coordination. They had been placed in different sections to maximize their access to information and minimize the chance of detection. That afternoon, Marcus witnessed something that made him realize the situation was far more urgent than he had initially believed. During a shift change, he observed Kozlov receiving what appeared to be a routine medical exam from Dr. Sarah Kim, the facility's physician. However, Marcus noticed that Dr. Kim spent an unusual amount of time in Kozlov's cell, and their conversation seemed more intense than a typical medical consultation. After Dr. Kim left, Marcus found an excuse to walk past Kozlov's cell. The inmate was sitting calmly on his bunk, but Marcus noticed something that chilled him to the bone. On the small table in the cell was a piece of paper with what appeared to be a hand-drawn diagram. From his limited view, Marcus could see that it showed the layout of part of the facility, including security station locations and camera positions. Marcus knew he was looking at escape planning or something even worse. The operatives weren't just communicating, they were preparing for action. The question was, when and what was their objective? His meeting with Agent Torres that evening provided crucial context that made the situation even more alarming. Torres had spent the day researching the 3 suspects Marcus had identified, and her findings were disturbing. Marcus, these aren't ordinary criminals. Viktor Kozlov's background shows inconsistencies that suggest identity fabrication. The arms trafficking charges are real, but his fingerprints don't match any databases prior to his arrival in the United States 5 years ago. Alex Petrov has similar issues. His digital footprint only goes back 3 years, which is unusual for someone allegedly involved in long-term cybercrime operations. Torres pulled out a folder containing photographs and documents. Elena Vasquez is the most interesting case. She was arrested in a drug operation, but the DEA agents who handled her case noted unusual behavior. She seemed more interested in the law enforcement procedures than in avoiding prosecution. One agent described her as conducting her own investigation during interrogation. The implications were staggering. Marcus was dealing with 3 professional operatives who had been deliberately arrested and placed in the federal detention facility. They weren't trying to escape, they were conducting an operation from within the prison. What could they be after? Marcus asked. Torres consulted her notes. The facility houses several high-value inmates awaiting trial. There's a former CIA officer who defected and is cooperating with federal prosecutors. There's also a federal judge who was arrested for corruption and is expected to testify against organized crime figures. Either of these individuals could be targets for elimination or extraction. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a text message. It was from Supervisor Williams. Emergency staff meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow. New security protocols being implemented immediately. Marcus showed the message to Torres, and her expression became grim. Marcus, if they're implementing new security protocols suddenly, it might mean someone else has noticed unusual activity. Or worse, the operatives might be accelerating their timeline because they know they're under suspicion. Torres made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. I'm going to contact my supervisor tonight and request emergency authorization to place the facility under federal surveillance. We need to move quickly, but we also need to be smart about this. If these are foreign operatives, arresting them too early might prevent us from understanding the full scope of their mission. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Torres gave Marcus specific instructions for the following day. Continue your normal routine, but document everything you see. If you observe any behavior that suggests immediate danger to staff or inmates, contact me immediately. Don't wait for regular communication windows. Marcus drove home with a sense of urgency and responsibility that reminded him of his most dangerous military missions. He was no longer just a prison guard who had noticed something unusual. He was an intelligence operative working to prevent what could be a catastrophic breach of national security. That night, Marcus prepared for what he knew would be the most challenging day of his civilian career. He reviewed his military training on surveillance and counterintelligence, organized his documentation, and mentally prepared for various scenarios he might encounter. His last entry in his investigation log that night was prescient. Day 3 of investigation. Subjects are professional operatives conducting coordinated operation within federal facility. Immediate threat level unknown, but evidence suggests sophisticated planning and external support. Tomorrow will likely determine whether this operation can be stopped before it reaches its objective. As Marcus tried to sleep, he couldn't escape the feeling that time was running out. The emergency staff meeting, the accelerated communications between the operatives, and the detailed facility diagrams all pointed to one conclusion. Whatever the operatives were planning was about to happen, and Marcus might be the only person positioned to stop it. The investigation phase was ending, and the most dangerous part was about to begin. The emergency staff meeting at 7 a.m. confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Supervisor Williams stood before the assembled guards and administrative staff with an expression more serious than Marcus had ever seen. The room was tense, filled with the kind of focused attention that usually preceded major security incidents. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received intelligence from federal authorities that there may be security concerns within our facility. Effective immediately, we're implementing Code Orange protocols. All inmate movements will be restricted to essential activities only. Recreational time is suspended, and all non-critical medical appointments are postponed. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Someone had alerted federal authorities, but he wasn't sure if it was Agent Torres's investigation or if another source had identified the threat. Either way, the operatives would know that their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Williams continued with the briefing. We're also implementing enhanced surveillance procedures. Guards will conduct cell inspections every 2 hours instead of every 4 hours. Any unusual behavior, no matter how minor, should be reported immediately to the command center. As the meeting concluded, Marcus noticed Dr. Sarah Kim in the back of the room. She appeared nervous, repeatedly checking her phone and avoiding eye contact with the other staff members. Marcus's intelligence training had taught him to watch for stress indicators in suspects, and Dr. Kim was displaying several classic signs of someone under pressure. Marcus returned to Block D with a heightened sense of awareness. The new security protocols had created a noticeably different atmosphere in the facility. Inmates seemed more restless, and the usual routine conversations between guards and prisoners had been replaced by formal, professional interactions. Victor Kozlov's behavior had changed dramatically overnight. Instead of his usual calm demeanor, he appeared agitated and kept glancing toward the cell window. During the first enhanced inspection at 9 a.m., Marcus noticed that the symbol on the cell wall had been altered again. This time, it included what appeared to be timing marks, small scratches that could indicate hours or specific time intervals. At 10:30 a.m., Marcus observed something that made him realize the operation was entering its final phase. During a routine medical check, Dr. Kim approached Kozlov's cell with her standard medical bag. However, Marcus noticed that the bag appeared heavier than usual. Kim's movements were more deliberate and careful. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe the interaction without being obvious about his surveillance. Through the cell's window, he saw Dr. Kim remove what appeared to be a standard medical instrument, but her handling of it suggested it was something else entirely. She placed it in Kozlov's hands for exactly 15 seconds before taking it back and continuing with what appeared to be a normal examination. The exchange was so brief and professional that it would have been undetectable to anyone not specifically watching for covert communication. But Marcus recognized it as a dead drop, the transfer of an item or information from one operative to another using an apparently innocent interaction. Marcus immediately contacted Agent Torres using the emergency number she had provided. Torres here. It's Marcus. The operation is accelerating. I just witnessed what I believe was a dead drop between one of the suspects and the facility physician. The timing coincides with the new security protocols. Marcus, federal teams are already moving into position around the facility. We've identified the 3 suspects you flagged, plus 2 additional individuals we believe are part of the network. One is the physician you mentioned, and the other is a maintenance supervisor who has access to the facility's infrastructure. The news that there were 5 operatives instead of 3 made Marcus realize the scope of the operation was even larger than he had imagined. What's their objective?
We believe they're planning to extract or eliminate a high-value target.
The former CIA officer I mentioned is scheduled to begin testifying in a major espionage trial next week. If foreign operatives can prevent his testimony, it could compromise several ongoing national security investigations. Torres's next words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Marcus, we've also discovered that the maintenance supervisor has been mapping the facility's electrical and communication systems. This isn't just an extraction operation. They may be planning something that could endanger everyone in the building. At exactly 11:45 a.m., the lights in Block D flickered twice, then went out completely. Emergency lighting activated immediately, bathing the corridors in an eerie red glow. Marcus's military training kicked in automatically. This wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of the operation. Marcus's radio crackled with urgent communications from the command center. All units, we have a facility-wide power outage. Secure your positions and await instructions. This is not a drill. Through the emergency lighting, Marcus could see that Kozlov was no longer in his cell. Somehow, during the brief darkness, he had managed to escape. Marcus immediately activated his radio. Command, this is Chen in Block D. I have an escaped inmate. Cell 18 is empty. But before he could receive a response, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of multiple cell doors opening electronically. The power outage had been used to trigger a mass release of inmates from Block D. In the red emergency lighting, Marcus could see prisoners emerging from their cells, some confused, others clearly aware that something unusual was happening. Marcus realized he was witnessing a carefully coordinated operation. The power outage, the open cell doors, and the chaos that would inevitably follow were all designed to provide cover for the real objective. While security forces dealt with a potential riot situation, the operatives would have the freedom to move through the facility and complete their mission. His radio buzzed with Agent Torres's voice on the emergency frequency. Marcus, federal response teams are entering the facility now. We need you to get to the high security wing and ensure the safety of the federal witness. The escaped inmates are a diversion. The real target is in protective custody. Marcus began moving through the facility toward the high security wing, using his knowledge of the building's layout to avoid the main corridors, where confused and potentially dangerous inmates were now wandering. His military training in urban combat proved invaluable as he navigated through the emergency-lit passages. As he approached the high security wing, Marcus encountered Dr. Kim in a service corridor. She was carrying her medical bag and moving with obvious purpose toward the protected witness area. When she saw Marcus, her expression changed from focused determination to panic. Kim, I need you to stop right there, Marcus called out, his hand moving to his radio to call for backup. Instead of complying, Kim reached into her medical bag and withdrew what Marcus immediately recognized as a compact pistol. I'm sorry, Sergeant Chen, but you've interfered with this operation long enough. The fact that she knew his military rank confirmed that the operatives had been monitoring him, possibly since the beginning of his investigation. Marcus realized that his surveillance had been detected, and the operatives had been planning for his intervention. Dr. Kim, you don't want to do this. Federal agents are already in the building. Surrender now, and you can minimize the consequences of your involvement. The consequences of failure are far worse than anything your justice system can impose, she replied, her weapon trained on Marcus. The witness will not testify, and this operation will be completed. Marcus knew he had seconds to act. His military training in close-quarters combat had taught him to create opportunities even in disadvantageous situations. He noticed that Dr. Kim's position in the narrow corridor limited her movement options, and her medical training might make her hesitate to use lethal force. Dr. Kim, think about what you're doing. You became a physician to save lives, not to end them. Whatever they're threatening you with, we can protect you. For a moment, he saw uncertainty in her eyes, but before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Viktor Kozlov appeared behind Dr. Kim, no longer wearing his prison uniform, but dressed in maintenance coveralls that would allow him to move freely through the facility. Enough talking, Kozlov said in accented English. Complete the mission. I'll handle the guard. The situation had become desperate, but Marcus had one advantage. He knew the facility better than the operatives did. He also remembered something crucial from his intelligence training. In a hostage situation, create confusion, and divide the enemy's attention. Marcus suddenly shouted at full volume, "Federal agents! They're in Corridor 7. Armed suspects moving toward high security." The shout echoed through the facility's intercom system, which was still operational despite the power outage. Immediately, Marcus could hear the sound of running footsteps and radio chatter as security forces converged on their location. Kozlov made the mistake of turning toward the approaching sounds, giving Marcus the opening he needed. Using techniques learned in combat training, Marcus dove toward Dr. Kim, tackling her low and causing her to discharge the weapon harmlessly into the ceiling. The gunshot reverberated through the corridor, providing additional confirmation to the responding teams of their exact location. Within seconds, the corridor was filled with federal agents in tactical gear, their weapons trained on the two operatives. "Federal agents, drop your weapons and get on the ground." The operation that had been months in the planning was over in less than 30 seconds. Dr. Kim and Viktor Kozlov were taken into custody along with the other 3 operatives who were captured throughout the facility. Later that day, as Marcus completed his statement to federal investigators, Agent Torres provided him with the full scope of what they had uncovered. "Marcus, your investigation prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach. The operatives were part of a foreign network that had been working for over a year to eliminate the federal witness and destroy evidence in several national security cases. The symbol you spotted was just the beginning. They had established a complete communication network within the facility, compromised staff members, and were planning to make the witness's death look like a prison riot casualty. Your attention to detail and willingness to act on your suspicions saved not just one life, but potentially dozens of ongoing intelligence operations." 3 months later, Marcus received a commendation from the Department of Homeland Security for his actions in preventing the foreign intelligence operation. The 5 operatives were convicted of conspiracy, espionage, and attempted murder, receiving sentences ranging from 25 years to life in prison. The federal witness successfully testified in his cases, leading to the conviction of several foreign agents and the disruption of multiple intelligence networks. The trials also revealed that the operation Marcus had uncovered was part of a larger campaign to undermine U.S. national security by eliminating key witnesses and stealing classified information. Marcus returned to his position at the Riverside Federal Detention Center, but with a new appreciation for the importance of vigilance and the value of trusting trained instincts. The facility implemented new security protocols based on the lessons learned from the operation, and Marcus was promoted to senior security specialist, with responsibilities for training other guards in threat recognition. 6 months after the incident, Marcus received a visit from Colonel Sarah Mitchell, his former commanding officer. "Marcus, I wanted to personally thank you for proving that military training never really ends. You saw what others missed, acted when others might have hesitated, and prevented a catastrophe through professional skill and personal courage." As Marcus looked back on the experience, he realized that the 3 scratched lines on a prison cell wall had been more than just a symbol. They had been a test of everything he had learned about duty, vigilance, and the importance of trusting trained instincts even in civilian life. The story of the guard who spotted a strange symbol had become a reminder that threats to national security can emerge anywhere, and that sometimes the smallest observations by dedicated individuals can prevent the largest disasters. Marcus Chen had proven that heroes aren't always found on battlefields. Sometimes they're found in the quiet corridors of federal facilities, watching carefully and ready to act when duty calls. The symbol had been a warning only the military could read, and Marcus had read it correctly. In doing so, he had not only saved lives but also demonstrated that service to country doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It simply takes new forms in new places, requiring the same courage, the same vigilance, and the same commitment to protecting others that had defined his military career. The investigation was closed, the operatives were convicted, and the facility was secure. But Marcus knew that somewhere, other symbols were being carved into other walls, and other guards would need to be ready to recognize them and act accordingly. The price of freedom, as he had learned long ago, was eternal vigilance, and sometimes that vigilance was rewarded by the chance to make a real difference when it mattered most.